Commander Elias Ward had always thought space was vast and silent, but that silence had never felt as heavy as it did now. He sat alone in the shuttle, watching the stars slip past like silver rivers. The invitation to the Veyari court had arrived only a week ago, sealed in golden script and delivered by an alien courier who looked at him as though he carried the fate of worlds in his hands. Most humans would have felt proud. After all, humanity was still new to the galactic conquered. The other species of the galaxy saw Earth as young, reckless, and fragile. They whispered that humans were too emotional, too stubborn, too chaotic to survive among civilizations that had measured their histories in thousands of years. Elias knew these whispers well. He had heard them himself in council meetings. But pride was not what Elias felt. Instead, he felt the weight of a question. Why him? The Veyari were a mystery even among the conquered. Their cities floated inside crystal domes on oceans of violet water. Their ships glowed like living stars, and their court was wrapped in layers of ritual and secrecy. But the greatest mystery was their princess. No outsider had ever seen her unveiled. Some said her face was too radiant, others claimed it was cursed, and a few whispered she did not exist at all. Whatever the truth, the princess had asked, demanded that a human be brought to her court. Not just any human, him. As the shuttle docked at the orbiting station above Veyar Prime, Elias adjusted his uniform. It was simple compared to the robes and armor he had seen worn by alien dignitaries. Navy blue with silver trim, the emblem of Earth sewn on the shoulder. No crown, no jewels, no weapons. Just fabric, thread, and a name badge that read, Commander Elias Ward. The hatch opened and a wave of warm, fragrant air filled the cabin. The scent was sweet, like crushed flowers mixed with rain. 2 Veyari guards waited outside, tall and slender, their skin shimmering faintly like polished pearl. Their eyes were sharp, almost too sharp, as though they could see straight into his thoughts. "You are the human envoy," one said, his voice calm but edged. "I am," Elias replied, stepping forward. They said nothing more, only gestured for him to follow. The station's halls curved like the inside of a seashell, walls glowing with soft blue light. Other aliens passed them, some staring, some whispering. Elias caught fragments of their words. Human, reckless species. The princess has chosen. Why him? He kept walking, shoulders straight, his face calm. Inside his chest was a storm. The court chamber was vast, shaped like a circle, every surface polished until it gleamed. Rows of nobles stood in layered balconies above, their robes heavy with gems and metal. Their eyes turned downward the moment Elias entered. Some glared with open contempt. Others hid their mouths behind jeweled fans, whispering to one another. A few simply looked curious, as though studying a strange animal. At the center of the chamber was a raised platform. Upon it sat a tall, curved throne carved from crystal, glowing faintly with inner light. The throne was empty. A voice rang out, strong and commanding. "Commander Elias Ward of Earth, you stand before the court of Veyar, summoned at the request of Her Highness Princess Serenia. Do you understand the weight of this summons?" Elias raised his chin. "I understand that it is an honor, but I also understand that I was not given a choice." A ripple of laughter moved through the balconies. Some found his honesty amusing. Others looked offended. But Elias had not come to impress them. He had come because he had no other option. The chamber doors opened again. A hush fell so complete it was as if the air itself froze. The princess entered. She was veiled in layers of silver fabric that shimmered like water. Her steps were slow, deliberate, each one echoing in the chamber. 4 attendants followed, carrying banners stitched with symbols that Elias did not recognize. Her presence was unlike anything Elias had ever felt. It was not power in the way of generals or rulers. It was gravity, as though the entire room leaned toward her without realizing it. She walked past the nobles, past the guards, and stopped before Elias. He expected her to speak. She did not. She only stood there facing him, her head tilted slightly as if studying a puzzle. Then, to the shock of the court, she lifted her hands to her veil. Gasps filled the air. Nobles whispered frantically. One voice shouted, "It is forbidden." Another cried, "This cannot be allowed." But the princess ignored them. She lowered the veil. Her face was not monstrous. It was not radiant beyond reason. It was striking. Her skin shimmered faintly like her people's, but her features were softer, gentler, her eyes a deep violet that seemed to glow. and those eyes locked on Elias with an intensity that made his breath catch. She spoke. One word. One language. Finally, the chamber erupted. Shouts, protests, cries of disbelief. Guards tightened their grips on their weapons. Nobles leaned over the railings, demanding answers. But the princess raised one hand and silence fell instantly. She kept her gaze on Elias. "You have come," she said. "The one I have waited for. The one my people have denied would ever arrive." Elias felt every eye burning into him. His mouth was dry, his heart pounding, but he forced himself to speak. "I don't understand. Why me? Why a human?" Her lips curved in the smallest of smiles. "Because it was written that only your kind could awaken what was lost. And now the moment has come." Her words sent a shiver through the chamber. Some nobles shouted again, their voices echoing with anger. "Blasphemy. The human is unworthy. This breaks our law. The prophecy is a myth." But Elias hardly heard them. His mind was still caught on the princess's first word. Finally, as though she had been waiting for years. Finally, as though this meeting was not chance but destiny. Finally, as though the galaxy itself had been holding its breath for humanity's arrival. The chamber of the Veyari court still trembled with whispers after the princess lowered her veil. What had once been an unshakable law, no outsider would ever see her true face, had been broken in the space of a heartbeat. And she had done it for a human. Commander Elias. Ward felt the weight of every alien gaze pressing against him like iron chains. The balconies above were filled with nobles, ministers, and counselors, each one glaring down with sharp eyes. Some hissed in fury. Some muttered in disbelief. Others looked as though their entire world had crumbled. But Elias did not look at them. His eyes were fixed only on her, Princess Serenia. Her face was calm, her violet eyes locked on his as though nothing else in the universe mattered. She had spoken to him in perfect English, not in the flowing tones of the Veyari tongue. Finally, she had said. One word, but it carried the weight of centuries. The silence in the room stretched until one of the nobles broke it with a furious shout. "This is madness." The alien's voice was sharp like stone scraping metal. "No human is worthy of standing before Her Highness unveiled. He is a child of a young world, untested, reckless." Another joined in. "Remove him at once. His presence is an insult to our traditions." The crowd roared, voices rising like crashing waves. The guards tightened their stances, unsure if they were to protect the princess from Elias or Elias from the court. But before Elias could speak, the princess raised her hand. The chamber fell silent again. Her voice was steady, soft but commanding enough to silence an entire hall. "Enough." She turned slightly, her gaze sweeping across the rows of nobles. "You all speak of tradition. You speak of laws written in stone, but you forget that stone erodes and laws lose meaning when they serve only pride." She paused, her words cutting through the chamber like a blade. "I have chosen. He is the one." The uproar returned, louder this time. Some nobles clutched at their robes in outrage. Others covered their faces, unwilling to even look at Elias. But through it all, Elias stood still, his jaw tight, his mind spinning. The one? What did she mean by that? Why had she singled him out? The princess turned back to him. Her eyes softened for the first time since she entered. "You do not yet understand," she said quietly, her words meant for him alone. "But you will." Elias opened his mouth to respond, but another voice cut through the noise. The prophecy. It came from an old noble dressed in dark robes, his hair silver like threads of light. His voice shook not with anger, but with awe. "It is said the veiled heir would one day reveal herself, not to her people, not to her council, but to the outsider who awakens what is hidden." His eyes fell on Elias. Perhaps this is that moment. His words only deepened the storm. The chamber split in two. Some shouted that the prophecy was real, that it justified her actions. Others claimed it was a myth, a dangerous excuse for breaking sacred law. The noise rose and rose, a thunder that made Elias's head ache. Through it all, Serenia's gaze did not leave him. At last, Elias found his voice. He spoke calmly, though his throat felt tight. "Your Highness, I don't know what this prophecy says. I don't know why you believe I'm part of it. But if I've been brought here as some kind of symbol," he hesitated, then straightened his shoulders, "I'd like to understand. Why me? Why humanity?" The princess studied him for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, close enough that Elias could see faint patterns on her skin. like starlight hidden beneath the surface. Her presence was both beautiful and unnerving. "Because your kind carries what mine has forgotten," she said softly. "Because you are fire where we have become stone. And because I saw this moment long before you arrived." Elias blinked. "You saw it?" Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "In dreams, in visions. The faces of humans I did not know. A name I could not understand. Until now." Before Elias could answer, the High Minister stepped forward. He was taller than most, his robe heavy with symbols of authority. His voice was cold and sharp. "Your Highness, this cannot continue. The veil has been broken, but the law remains. The human must be tested. If he is to stand in our court, if he is to be given such recognition, he must prove himself." The nobles cheered at this suggestion, voices rising with approval. "Yes, test him. Let him face the trials. Let us see if this outsider is truly chosen." Elias frowned. "Trials?" The minister looked down at him with thinly veiled disdain. "The right of proof. A series of challenges older than our council itself. Any who would claim a place of honor must face them. Few succeed, most fall." Elias's gut tightened. He was no stranger to tests, but he had not come here to fight games or riddles. He had come as a diplomat. Yet the way the nobles glared at him, he knew refusal was not an option. The princess's expression hardened. "This is not necessary," but the minister pressed on. "If the prophecy is true, then let him prove it. If it is false, better he fail now than poison our court with weakness." The chamber roared with agreement. Elias drew a slow breath. His instincts screamed at him to refuse, but another part of him, the stubborn human part that hated being dismissed, rose like fire in his chest. If they wanted to test him, so be it. He looked at the princess. Her eyes searched his, filled with worry she did not voice. "I'll do it," Elias said firmly. His voice carried across the chamber, silencing the crowd. "If that's what it takes to show you who humans are, then I'll face your trials." The chamber erupted again, but this time the voices were filled with excitement, anticipation, even hunger. The minister smiled thinly. "So be it. Tomorrow at dawn the human will begin the rite of proof." The guards moved to escort Elias away, but before they could, the princess spoke again. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that froze everyone. "Do not underestimate him." For a heartbeat, the hall was silent once more. Then Elias was led from the chamber, the whispers of nobles trailing after him like shadows. As he walked, his mind raced. He had come here expecting diplomacy. Instead, he had been thrust into prophecy, trials, and mysteries he did not understand. Yet one thing echoed in his mind louder than the rest. When she looked at him, Serenia had not seen a stranger. She had seen something more. The night before the trials felt longer than any night Elias had ever known. He was given a chamber in the royal compound, though calling it a chamber felt misleading. The room was vast, lined with walls that glowed faintly like starlight caught in crystal. The bed was soft and curved like a seashell. The air smelled faintly of flowers and salt as if carried from some distant ocean. It was meant to comfort him. But Elias did not sleep. He sat near the tall window, staring at the alien city below. Towers of silver rose out of glowing waters, their surfaces alive with lights that shifted like fireflies. Small craft moved silently between them, their trails glimmering. Everything looked serene, perfect. Yet Elias could feel the weight of tension pressing against the city like a storm about to break. "They don't want me here," he thought. "They want me to fail." The prophecy, the unveiling, the princess's strange certainty. It all pressed on him, heavy as the silence between the stars. And now he was expected to face trials designed by a civilization older than human history itself. What kind of challenges would those be? Combat, puzzles, survival? He rubbed his face and gave a low laugh. "I signed up to be a diplomat," he muttered. "Not a chosen one." A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Enter," he called. The door slid open, and Princess Serenia stepped inside. She no longer wore the heavy ceremonial veils. Instead, she was dressed in a simple robe of dark silver, her hair unbound, flowing like liquid shadow around her shoulders. Without the layers of formality, she looked younger, more human in a strange way. But her violet eyes still glowed with that same intensity. Elias stood, uncertain. "Your Highness," she raised a hand. "When we are alone, you need not call me that." Serenia is enough. He hesitated, then nodded. Serenia. She crossed the room and stood beside him at the window. For a long moment, neither spoke. Together they looked at the glowing city below, its lights reflecting on the water like stars scattered on the surface of a sea. At last, Elias broke the silence. Why me? Her gaze remained on the city. Because it was always meant to be you. That's not an answer. She turned, her eyes meeting his. Long ago, before I was born, our seers spoke of a time when my people would lose themselves. We would become stagnant, proud, blind to what made us strong. In that time, they said, one would come from beyond the stars, not a conqueror, not a savior, but a mirror. A being who would remind us of what we had forgotten. Her words sent a shiver through Elias. And you think that's me? I do not think, she said softly. I know, I saw it in vision since I was a child. A face unlike ours, eyes filled with defiance, a voice that refused silence. I saw you before I knew your world even existed. Elias shook his head slowly. I'm just a man. A soldier, a diplomat. I'm not special. Her lips curved faintly. That is what makes you special. You do not see yourself as chosen. You simply act. You endure. That is what we have lost, Elias frowned. What do you mean, lost? Serenia's expression darkened. She turned back to the window. My people were not always as you see them. Once we were explorers, dreamers, fighters. We burned with life. But as centuries passed, we grew comfortable. Safe. We built walls of tradition, laws carved in stone, and told ourselves that we were unshakable. We forgot struggle. We forgot fire. She looked at him again. Humans still carry that fire. It is why the others fear you. It is why I unveiled myself to you. And it is why the trials tomorrow are not just for you, Elias. They are for us all. Her words settled heavy in the air. Elias looked away, uneasy. And if I fail? Her silence was answer enough. Finally, she said, then the last hope for my people will vanish. Elias stared at her, stunned. That's a lot to put on one man's shoulders. She gave the faintest of smiles. I never said it would be fair. They stood in silence again, but now Elias's thoughts churned faster than ever. He wanted to argue, to tell her she had the wrong man, that humanity had no business being tangled in alien prophecies. But deep inside, another voice stirred, the same voice that had carried him through battles, through impossible missions, through every moment when surrender had been the easier choice. Don't give up. Don't back down. Stand even when it hurts. Finally, he asked, what kind of trials are we talking about? Serenia's eyes grew distant. The right of proof is older than memory. It was once used to test our leaders. It does not test strength alone. It tests heart, mind, and spirit. You will face illusions, challenges of endurance, and choices that will cut at your soul. Many have tried, most did not return. Elias gave a short, humorless laugh. Sounds like a fair test. Her eyes softened. Do not joke, Elias. It will be harder than anything you have faced. But I believe you can endure it. He met her gaze, saw the quiet conviction there, and felt something stir in him. Something beyond duty, beyond fear. I'll try, he said. She nodded once. That is all I ask. The next morning, the court gathered once more. The chamber was even more crowded than before, filled with nobles, ministers, and curious onlookers. Word of the princess's unveiling and the prophecy had spread, and everyone wanted to see the human face the right of proof. Elias stood at the center, dressed in a plain uniform, no weapons, no tools. Only his will. The High Minister stepped forward, his expression sharp and cold. Commander Elias Ward of Earth, you stand before the right of proof you may not refuse. You may not retreat. You may only endure or you will fall. Elias said nothing. He only nodded once. The floor beneath him began to glow. Symbols lit up, forming a circle of light that spread outward. The chamber darkened. The air grew heavy, humming with unseen power. The minister raised his hand. The first trial begins now. The light flared and the world dissolved around Elias. When Elias opened his eyes, he was no longer in the chamber. He stood in the ruins of a battlefield. Smoke filled the air. The ground was littered with broken weapons and shattered armor. Strange alien corpses lay scattered around, their faces twisted in fear. Elias's chest tightened. This was not Earth, not any battle he had known. Yet it felt real, too real. The air burned in his lungs, the stench of blood and fire stung his nose. A voice echoed through the smoke. Do you run, human? Do you surrender? Or do you stand? Figures rose from the smoke, warriors taller than any man, their weapons glowing. They charged. Elias clenched his fists. He had no gun, no blade. Only his body, his training, his will. His heart pounded, but he planted his feet. I stand, he growled. And as the first warrior struck, Elias met him head-on. Back in the real chamber, Sirenia watched the glowing circle where Elias's body stood motionless, his eyes closed. Around her the nobles whispered, some mocking, some doubtful. But Sirenia's eyes never wavered. She whispered to herself, almost like a prayer. Remember, Elias, remember who you are. The battlefield of illusion stretched endlessly, a wasteland of smoke, shattered stone and fire that smelled both real and unreal. Commander Elias Ward's boots sank slightly in the ash with every step. Around him shadows moved, twisting and warping into shapes that seemed almost human, but not quite. The voice echoed again, low and commanding, vibrating through the air. Human, you have come. Now prove your worth. Endure, survive, conquer what lies within. Elias clenched his fists. He had no weapon, no shield, only himself. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to fight only if he had a blade. But he remembered Sirenia's words. You endure because that is what makes you strong. He took a deep breath. The first figure emerged from the smoke. A giant, taller than any soldier he had ever seen. Its limbs bent at impossible angles, its face a mass of shifting shadows. It roared, and the ground beneath Elias shook. He darted forward instinctively. His training in human combat was enough to evade the first strike, but the creature attacked relentlessly, faster than he could track with his eyes. Every move he made was instinctive, dodge, pivot, strike with fists and elbows. There was no weapon, only his body and his resolve. Hours seemed to pass. Time in the right was strange. Minutes stretched into eternities, and pain became a constant companion. He felt his muscles scream, his lungs burn, his mind push at the edges of exhaustion. And yet, he did not fall. The battlefield shifted suddenly. Smoke cleared, revealing a dense forest under a sky of strange, swirling colors. Trees towered above him, their bark glowing faintly as if alive. Birds with feathers of light swooped overhead, calling in voices that sounded like music. Elias's chest rose and fell rapidly. The forest was beautiful, too beautiful. He could hear laughter echoing among the trees, soft and mocking. The voice returned, whispering directly into his mind. You are weak. You have no place here. You cannot endure what is coming. Elias froze, shaking his head. I am human, he said aloud. I endure. That is what I do, the forest responded. Shadows detached themselves from the trees, forming figures of people he had known. Friends lost in battles. Soldiers who had died under his command, their faces twisted in anger, in grief, in accusation. Why did you survive? Why not us? One shadow asked, its voice eerily like his own. Elias staggered backward, but he held his ground. I carry their memory. I fight because of them. That is what humans do. The illusions lunged at him. Every shadow, every memory, every fear combined into a torrent meant to break him. And yet he pressed forward. With each step, each punch, each desperate dodge, he refused to falter. Hours, or perhaps days, passed. Pain, fear, and doubt surrounded him. But Elias found a rhythm. His body was bruised, bloodied, every nerve screaming. Yet he began to notice patterns in the trials. The illusions were not merely obstacles. They were tests of character. The smoke battlefield tested his courage. The forest tested his resolve. The memories tested his heart. He realized something vital. The right of proof did not seek the strongest or the fastest or even the smartest. It sought the human qualities the Veyri had forgotten, stubbornness, empathy, and the will to endure even when every instinct said to surrender. I will not fall, he whispered to himself, though the words felt small against the vastness of the right. I am human. I endure. Then the final stage of the trial appeared. Elias stood at the edge of a cliff that stretched endlessly downward. Below him was darkness, broken only by faint sparks of light, like stars scattered across a void. Across the cliff floated platforms, each one shifting in place. A single path of glowing tiles extended into the void, each step uncertain. A voice spoke again, calm and deep. This is the test of trust. Every step is uncertain. One false move and you fall. Many have tried and failed. Elias looked down, his stomach twisted. The fall would be endless. But he reminded himself of what he had learned. Courage was not the absence of fear, but action despite it. Step by step he advanced. Each tile shifted, tilting beneath his weight. He had to focus on balance, on anticipation, on moving forward even when the path seemed to vanish beneath him. Halfway across, a platform cracked. He froze. Shadows reached up from the void, grasping at him, whispering, "You cannot do this. You are weak. You are alone." Elias clenched his jaw. "I am not alone," he said aloud. "I carry my people. I carry humanity. And I endure." With that, he leapt across the broken platform, landing on solid ground. His legs shook, but he stood, eyes forward. The last step brought him to a small pedestal of glowing crystal. On it was a mirror. Elias approached cautiously. He looked into it and saw himself. But not just as he was. He saw his courage, his stubbornness, his empathy reflected back at him. Every choice he had ever made, every life he had saved or risked, every time he had stood when others would have fallen, it all shone in the mirror. A voice, now familiar and gentle, spoke from nowhere. "You see now, human, you carry what we have forgotten. You endure, not because you are perfect, but because you are human, and that is why you were chosen." Elias blinked. Chosen for what? The mirror shimmered, and the reflection of Princess Sirenia appeared behind him. Her violet eyes glowed softly. "To remind my people that strength is not only measured in power, but in heart. That courage is not only in battles, but in standing when the world says you cannot. That hope is not only for the strong, but for all who refuse to give up." Elias's chest tightened. He understood now. The right of proof was not merely a trial. It was a lesson for both him and the Veari. Humanity was not just another species. Humans carried fire, defiance, and the will to endure. A fire that could ignite hope even in the oldest and proudest of civilizations. He took a deep breath. I understand." The mirror dissolved into light, and the battlefield, the forest, the cliff, all of it vanished. Elias found himself back in the Veari chamber. His uniform was intact, though his body felt sore and battered. The nobles were watching him, their expressions unreadable. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then, one by one, the counselors began to applaud. Some cautiously, some with awe, some with disbelief. The minister who had announced the trial stepped forward. His voice was low, filled with reluctant respect. "Commander Elias Ward, you have passed the right of proof." Elias's legs felt weak, but he straightened. I survived," he said quietly. The princess stepped forward, her gaze soft and proud. She extended her hand. "You have not only survived, Elias. You have reminded us what it means to endure, to act, to fight when hope seems lost. My people will remember this day forever." Elias shook her hand, feeling warmth and certainty. This trial had been more than a test of skill. It had been a proving ground for humanity itself. And humans had passed. In that moment, he understood what Sirenia had seen from the beginning, that even in a galaxy of powerful and ancient species, humans carried a spark that could not be ignored. The chamber of the Veari court was silent. Commander Elias Ward, standing at its center, felt the echoes of his own heartbeat. Around him, the nobles and counselors whispered to one another, their voices a mix of awe, disbelief, and cautious admiration. The right of proof had ended, and Elias had survived. More than survived, he had passed, yet he felt no triumph. Not yet. He knew the trials had been only the beginning. They had tested him physically, mentally, and emotionally. But now he faced a different challenge, the court itself. How would the Veari receive him, a human, now proven as something more than they had believed possible? Princess Sirenia stepped forward, her violet eyes fixed on him. She had removed her ceremonial robes, revealing her natural form, simple and elegant yet commanding. The light of the chamber reflected on her skin, making her seem almost ethereal. But it was not beauty alone that drew attention. It was her certainty, her unwavering confidence in him. "Elias," she said softly, her voice carrying across the chamber, "you have endured the right. You have proven what I have known from the beginning, that humans carry what we have lost. But the trials are not the end. They are only the first step." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I understand," he said. "I did what I could. I stood even when it seemed impossible. A murmur moved through the chamber. Some nobles nodded, grudgingly respectful. Others still whispered doubts. But now no one could deny the truth. The human before them had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. The High Minister stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Commander Ward," he said, his voice firm, "you have indeed survived the rite of proof. Few have endured what you faced. Many have failed. And yet here you stand." Elias straightened. "Thank you," he said simply. The minister hesitated, then continued, his tone softening slightly. "Your courage is undeniable. Your endurance remarkable, but you are still human. How can we trust that this is not a fleeting moment? That you will not falter in times of real crisis?" Elias met his gaze steadily. "I am human," he said. "We endure because we must. We fight because it is right. We rise when others fall. That is who we are." The minister studied him for a long moment. Then with a slight nod he stepped back. A ripple of approval spread through the chamber. Serenia moved closer to Elias, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. The touch was simple, yet it carried warmth and reassurance. "They will accept you," she said. "Eventually. But first they must see that humanity is not just a visitor in this galaxy. We are a force to be respected, even feared when necessary." Elias looked at her, seeing the depth of her trust and conviction. "I did not come here to prove humans are strong," he said quietly. "I came to understand your people and perhaps to help," Serenia smiled. "And you have done both. You have reminded us of courage, of hope, of determination. You have reminded us that strength is not only in power but in heart. That is why I unveiled myself to you. That is why I chose you." The court was quiet, but the air seemed to shift. The nobles, once skeptical, now regarded him differently. The whispers of doubt were replaced by murmurs of awe. Even those who had openly opposed him could not deny the truth. A human had stood where many of their own had failed. The High Minister raised his hand. "Then it is settled. Commander Elias Ward of Earth, you are recognized not only as a survivor of the rite of proof, but as an honored guest of the Veyari court. Your presence here is a testament to what humanity can offer this galaxy." A wave of whispers and applause swept through the chamber. Elias felt the energy of the room pressing against him, and for the first time he allowed himself to smile. He had come as a diplomat, untested, uncertain. He now stood as a representative of humanity, recognized by a people older and wiser than any on Earth. Serenia extended her hand once more, this time publicly. "Elias Ward," she said, her voice carrying for all to hear, "you have proven more than endurance. You have reminded us what it means to hope. You have reminded us what it means to fight for what is right. For that you have my gratitude and the gratitude of my people." Elias took her hand, feeling her strength and conviction. I am honored," he said. "Not just for myself, but for humanity. We may be young, but we endure, we fight, we rise." Her eyes softened and she nodded. "That is why we waited for you. That is why you were chosen. Not because humans are perfect, but because humans refuse to give up. That is the spark we have forgotten." The nobles watched, some leaning forward in curiosity, others whispering among themselves. Slowly, the murmurs of doubt began to fade. Respect was growing. And for the first time, Elias felt the weight of what he represented, not just for himself, but for his entire species. The court chamber shifted then, subtly, almost magically. The walls glowed faintly, the air felt lighter, the tension eased. It was as if the Veyari themselves acknowledged that a change had come. Something new had arrived in their midst. Serenia guided him to the center of the chamber, where a circle of light pulsed softly beneath their feet. "Today we honor you," she said. "Not as a human visitor, not as a soldier, but as a bridge between worlds. You have reminded us that hope is alive, that courage is eternal, and that even the smallest spark can ignite a galaxy." Elias looked around, seeing the faces of the Veyari, some still wary, some curious, some openly admiring. He realized then that this was more than recognition. It was the beginning of a bond, not just between him and Serenia, but between humanity and an entire species that had once doubted them. He felt a deep sense of purpose. This was no longer a mission of diplomacy alone. This was a mission to show that humans, though young and often underestimated, carried a spark that could inspire, challenge, and even change the galaxy. Serenia stepped closer, her hand brushing his once more. The trials have ended, but our journey together has only begun, she said softly. The galaxy is vast, full of wonders and dangers alike. And now you are part of it, not just as a visitor, but as someone who has proven what humanity can achieve. Elias nodded. Then I will not fail. Not now, not ever. For you, for your people, for humanity. Her violet eyes glimmered with approval. I know you will not. That is why I chose you. The nobles began to speak again, this time not with doubt but with curiosity, with questions, with cautious admiration. They asked about his world, his people, his ideas. Elias answered with honesty, humility, and confidence. With every word he built bridges where once there had been suspicion. By the time the ceremony ended, Elias had done more than survive. He had changed perceptions, inspired hope, and created a bond between humans and the Veyari that could not be undone. Serenia guided him out of the chamber afterward, walking side by side. Outside, the sky of Veyar Prime stretched wide, filled with stars and alien moons that reflected on the violet oceans. The city glimmered like a jewel under the light, alive with energy and promise. You have done more than I imagined, she said quietly. You have not just endured. You have reminded us why humans are needed in this galaxy. You carry a fire we had almost forgotten. Elias smiled. I did what I could. But it feels like this is only the beginning. Her gaze softened. It is only the beginning. Together we will show the galaxy what can be achieved when courage meets determination, when hope meets action.